Welcome back to Sunrise. My guest is Felicia Ejipong. She is a reading specialist. Now, there are different kinds of reading, of course. You know, there's the A, B, C, D's, reading at the preschool or the early learning levels. There's advanced reading. There's reading for people such as myself. And, I always have a choice. Would I read a quote? Would I read an article? Or would I read a book? Well, which one do you think is best? I'll tell you this. The book is always the best. When you read a quote or a short article, you just read a little bit. When you read a book, you really get into the thoughts, the ideas, and the feelings of the writer as well as yourself. It makes you a better thinker, a better person. Now, literacy and numeracy are very vital to the educational and intellectual development of children. We all want all children to be intelligent, smart, clever, successful. Hardly anyone looks at a child and says, I don't care how you grow up, or even worse, I hope you grow up to be not too smart. It's the other way around. We want our children to be intelligent, both logically and emotionally. And the ability to read letters and numbers is very, very, very important to children in any country, and especially in Ghana. But reading difficulties reduce or even cut off the intellectual and educational development of many, many, many children. This eventually erodes the social and economic gains that we aspire to. You want to know how many? Well, here's a good example. Not just off the top of my head. This is today's edition of the Accra Times. I'm reading it. There's an article on page 4. It's a report about the Lambusi Kani district. The Lambusi Kani district is in the Upper West region of Ghana. It has recorded a massive 74.5% failure in the 2012 BECE, raising several concerns among stakeholders. The article is right there. You can see it for yourself. Right here, Lambusi Kani in the Upper West, 70+% failure in the BECs in 2012 alone. Now, this is certainly a matter of concern. Now, Frankfurt International School has published a research which supports the claim that there is a strong relationship between how well one can read in terms of being a child and academic performance. So reading proficiency and academic performance are directly linked at all ages. It doesn't matter whether you are 7 years old or you are 70 years old. How well and how much you like reading, and how well you do in terms of learning. Remember, learning is a lifelong activity. It's true. Your brain learns until you die, and even shortly after you're dead, we're told. So does Ghana have a policy to address reading difficulties that are apparently facing some children? What are these difficulties, and how could we possibly address them? To help me understand this and a lot more is a lady who runs the Readers Corner Literacy Center. Felicia Ejipong, good morning and welcome to Sunrise. You're a reading specialist, huh?
Yes, I am.
I loved reading when I was a child. I think I started reading at the age of 3. My parents found out I could read at the age of 10. It was simply by watching them, because they were reading a lot. They were both students at the university at the time, so we all lived in a one room sort of apartment, and we shared space, and children learn from what they see. So I could see my parents reading and studying, and they'd also, give me stuff to read. They say I learned to read upside down, actually, and it took me a while to go from printed text to cursive. That was one of my biggest difficulties.
Yeah, doing the cursive. I still don't do cursive.
So, what do you think? What do you think is happening in Ghana? Why is it, been so difficult for us to get our children to read well, and to love reading?
I think the problem is a bit complex. We just assume that children will learn to read. I think we start off on a wrong assumption.
So if you teach them some nursery rhymes, and you teach them
nursery rhymes, ABCs, and then if they are exposed to books, they will learn to read. And so we do not make the effort. We really don't think that you have to teach children to read.
Are you saying we should advertise reading the way we advertise movies and snacks?
We do. We really need to. In the U.S., reading is now linked to everything. If I take my child to a pediatrician, he'll come back with books. So you go to doctor's office, there are books there. You go to even the grocery store, there are books there. You go to shop, sometimes there are some things that you can buy and redeem the points for books. And books are linked to everything. Maybe the more books you read, and let your teacher know, if you read 10 books, you get 1 book to take home and keep. Different ways to encourage reading. Sometimes there's just some things that can come to your house. You just fill them and you receive free books by the mail.
Okay, talking about reading and how it is linked to academic performance, I want to share my personal experience with you. I love reading, like I told you, and I read everything. And by the time I got to school, to be honest with you, I was bored with what we were asked to read. And I was always reading what we call non-sila. And this was from Morning Star, primary school, all right through Achimota. I was always interested in non-sila, what we call, like
non-sila outside of
outside of the syllabus, outside of the curriculum. I always had difficulties with my teachers in everything. I was very popular with all the students when it came to creative and imaginative activities like telling stories, composition, the arts. But when it came to the syllabus, the curriculum, well, I just found it boring. Why? Because I loved reading so much and so widely. What would you say to that?
You love to read, so everybody's got their passion. And so here passion comes in. So maybe you are a creative person. So that would have had to be nurtured. Normally what we do is we just do rote memorization, and that is what would bore you. So if someone sees that maybe you're interested in the creative arts, you like reading, you like storytelling, in order to get you to do the academic thing, it has to be linked. Now you have math, story problems. They have to let you problem solve. So if you're going to do grammar, it has to be set in the context of problem solving. If you're doing math, it has to be set in the context of problem solving. I just saw, I was helping some girl with some homework, and they're doing decimals, rounding up and rounding down. You know what the problem was? After learning it, they say, in what situation can this be applied in real life context, where you buy something and the change will have to be round down or round up? So here is thinking. It's not something you've memorized that you're going to pour and give it to the teacher. So in your case, it would have been more creative, hands-on, real life situation, not just memorize and maybe groups and different things. So the teachers would have had to study your personality, your interest, and the same curriculum, sometimes adapted.
Okay, how do you get children who are more interested in physical activity or virtual activity? They want to ride bicycles, they want to play ball, they want to play with their dolls, they just want to hang around and talk, or maybe they want to play video games if they have access to them, or watch movies and television. How do you get children who are exposed to all these alternative, and rather attractive activities to actually start enjoying reading?
It depends on who the child is. If it's at home and you are the parent, you do leveraging.
Leveraging, what's that?
What I do and what I used to do with my kids is, okay, if we're going to read, we used to have what we call reading hour. And reading hour, you come from school, maybe you get to school, you get home at 3 o'clock, you eat snack, maybe from 4 to 5, it's reading hour. Everybody's reading. So most of the time, I'll drop whatever I'm doing, I pick up a book.
What if the child says it's boring?
It's boring, and so we're going to, first, if it's boring, it means the child has not read enough. So it means I'm going to give the child a book. We have to study, because sometimes I say, if you want a child to read, and all the books you want the child to read are textbooks, they're not going to read it. So you need to get storybooks, you need to get magazines, you need to get different things. One of my kids will not read what we call classics, but he would read anything that was detective, like detective stories and things like that. So I make sure that I bought books like that, like thrillers and stuff like that. So you need to study the child and find out what their interests like. Somebody likes cars. So for those who buy books about cars or about machines, about things like that, so you have to study the child, because this is not outside, this is not academic reading.
But is it important for the parents to read as well?
You do, because children do what children see. So if you're not reading and you always say, go and read, go and read, go and read, they're not going to read.
Or if you're reading a magazine and you ask the child to read a book, it's not quite the same.
Yeah, so sometimes it depends on the magazine. Sometimes I can get, my kids are always reading, I like John Maxwell. My kids are always reading those books, because it's like, I read a thing and I'm laughing, they go, why are you laughing? I say, well, go and read it and find out. So if I read a book and they see that I'm enjoying the book, the moment I put the book down, one of them will pick it up. And the kids that I work with, sometimes that's how I get them to read a book. I'll read them a storybook, I'll read them something, and the way I'll read the book, you know, if they enjoy it, if they're laughing, the moment I put the book down, one of them will pick it up.
Felicia, when we look at what happens in our schools and we look at children that come from, well, similar domestic backgrounds, you still see a difference in reading ability from an early age. Some children just don't seem to pick up on reading as well as others.
Okay.
What are some of the reasons for
Can I
this?
give you an example? I have 3 kids in the same home, by the same parents, the same environment. One went to kindergarten reading Charlotte's Web. He was already reading chapter books, not just sounding out books. The other went to the same school, barely recognizing his letters. He didn't even know how to write his name. Whatever I had worked with the oldest didn't seem to work with this one. And that told me that something was quite not
Different,
right.
eh?
Yes, something was not right. And so I had to take him to do some testing and everything, and it came out he was about 2 years behind in terms of language development. In those days, they didn't give the term dyslexic. But now I realize that all the tests that he was subjected to were dyslexic tests. So he was dyslexic. And I remember even complaining to the teachers, and they said, no, he's all right. You know, you just
What is
comparing
dyslexia?
him.
What is dyslexia? How does it, how would you explain it to someone who is not dyslexic?
Dyslexia is just difficulties learning to read.
I once saw a movie in which a child with dyslexia was portrayed as not seeing words and sentences in the same way that we do. They look at a page, but it's almost as if the words are all moving and jumbled up.
It depends. It depends. Not everybody does that. Some of them the letter shift. Those who the letter shift reading is this way. Reading is linear. If I'm going to read, I always have to read from left to right. From on a page, I have to read the words the same way. Right now that I'm looking at you, I don't have to look at you from left to right. I can look at you from right to left. I can look at you right center. I can look at you anyway. Most children who are dyslexic have trouble with the understanding that you always have to read from left to right. So if they're reading and they have difficulties, most of the time you find that they're reading from right to left.
I've tried that before.
Yeah, they read from right to left, or they read in the center. You see, Ghana here, because we're not taught how to read, even most adults don't realize that when you have a page, you don't set your eyes on the center of the page. You have to always set your eyes on the left corner of the page and scan your eye like that.
And then it becomes a habit, you don't even think about it.
Yes, and it becomes like that. So most of these children don't know how to scan. So they put their eyes either at the right or in the center, and if they can't read it, they kind of shift. And as they move their eyes, the words seem to be out of place.
You're talking about teachers. You're talking about teachers now, aren't you?
Teachers and children. So right now, that's one of my concerns. We really need to realize that children don't pick reading by chance. You need to teach them how to read, but also it's even called the print awareness. How do you treat a book?
But Felicia, what you're telling me now suggests the need and the importance of individual attention. So if you are one teacher and you've got 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60 children in front of you, how is it going to work?
It's always going to be a problem. So, but if you have 2 kids, and if there's a policy or if there's an awareness that we're going to teach this, then once you teach it, you can also group the classes. You can group the children into different reading abilities. I know that that's what they do in the U.S., and I know that that's what they do even in some of the schools here which are doing well. So you know the kids who are doing well and you know those who are struggling in your class. So you pair them up. So you can have maybe a group of 5 with one who is good, with others who are maybe in the middle, and some who are struggling, and then you can do that. You can get around the big class sizes if you can learn to group the kids. And then those who need individual attention, then you can have more time, to deal with them. I mean, sometimes some children can't help, so you can have more time to deal with them. But it starts with the awareness that you need to give it serious attention. Just standing on the board and writing and copying and talking and thinking that they will get it, most of them won't.
Well, we're looking at reading or learning difficulties. What about other difficulties like hearing or sight impairment, impaired sight and impaired hearing? That can really exacerbate things. And I'm not sure if in Ghana, when one applies to a preschool, a kindergarten, or a nursery, or even a primary school, a hearing test or a sight test is mandatory. Does this also affect a significant percentage of our children hearing and seeing difficulties?
They do, and I think that's why maybe our policymakers or education need to have a policy framework, because we don't seem to have anything like that. Because if you maybe go to Britain or any of these developed countries and your child is going to say even a preschool, the child would have to bring a doctor's report about hearing, sight, and groove chart and everything like that. So if your child is having difficulty with reading, the first thing that will be suggested to you is to go make sure that his eyes are working all right. Take the child to an ophthalmologist or something like that and check his eyes. Let's make sure that the letters or the words that he's having trouble reading, he's actually seeing them. Because my son was found out to be long-sighted, so we had to get him glasses. So
that children can actually see what's on the board, yes, or see what's in front, yes, of them. Because if you can see it, plus maybe you're dyslexic, plus maybe you are a little bored, or you've not, had that culture at home. And talking about home, what role does the economy play? The economics, domestic or community economics. I learned the other day that our school calendars, our academic calendars, where the holidays are, traditionally are timed to coincide with planting and harvesting seasons. Well, that came to us from from the Europeans. And so in Ghana, you find that especially in the farming communities, many children do not go to school when it is time to plant, to weed, or to harvest. To what extent would you say this affects their reading culture? Because between 5 and 3, like 1 hour a day, if that 1 hour a day is spent on the farm or spent trading because you need to make a little bit of extra money, you're not talking about reading. What about those children? And there's a lot of them.
If you read literature on literacy, one of the factors is that learning and reading is directly impacted by social classes or socioeconomic structure or status. A child who is reared in an academic home is likely to pick up more healthy reading habits and learning habits. You have some who will still not pull their weight than a child who is in more disadvantageous circumstances, maybe a farmer, where the parents, even though they may say go and study, don't know what you're doing. And sometimes some of them, do I say don't care, more concerned with trying to let the family survive than going to school. In that way, going to school becomes like a wage, because we're trying to feed the family and you need to pull your weight, you need to contribute your quota. So sometimes education becomes necessary. The world is becoming more and more informational and digital, and so if you want a better future for your child, the best thing you can give them is to give them a good education. And it's not just important to send them to school. What is more important is to ensure that they are learning. And so education comes in where the families will see that they have to help their children learn. So maybe they can help on the farm, maybe on weekends or stuff like that. But when it's school time, please let them go to school.
Okay, well, maybe next time we'll invite a farmer. I want us to touch on attention. Children are notorious for having a short attention span. I think I have the attention span of 5 or 6 year old, but working on Sunrise has really helped me stretch it to about 20-25 minutes at a go. But I still love reading. What about how do you help children or adults who say, well, they have no time, but what they're really saying is they don't have the attention?
What you need to do is, sometimes when you work with, most of the time you find that working with children who have reading difficulties, attention is always a problem. So sometimes you let them do short bits. If we're going to do 1 hour, we're not going to do all the 1 hour at a stretch. So we break it up. So you do maybe a little bit sitting down, reading, or a little bit writing. Then maybe I will read to you for a few minutes. You go play for a few minutes. We do so that what you do when you break it up into segments. So they are not sitting down doing the same thing for a long time, because then they look at you and you lose them. So you have to learn to break the thing into small segments so that you can get them working for 1 hour but not doing the same thing. Rotate the thing, break it up, do a little bit. So most of the time, you read a little bit, you can maybe we'll work out at some sounds, then maybe I'll read to you. Most of the time, if you do it, children like adults to read to them. So maybe I'll read to you, maybe you go up and play for a little bit, or you sit down. So most of the time, I have some kind of toys or something. You draw or you color or you do something, and then we...
Do you know why I'm laughing? Felicia, one of our viewers, Walter Samoa, has posted something incredible. It says, our academic system will make you fail if you are interested into reading widely. Now, I wonder whether you would agree or disagree with that.
No, what is wrong with our system is that our system doesn't seem to encourage creative thinking. I always have trouble, especially sometimes when I'm helping my kids with homework or I'm doing something. Our system encourages rote learning.
Just remember what I told you, and nothing more, nothing less.
And sometimes it doesn't matter whether you are right. That is not the answer I have down. I mean, just a banal example where, unscramble words, and the teacher put R-E-B-A-D, and the teacher wants bread. Do you know the same letter spelled beard?
Yeah. And
the child spells beard, and the teacher marks it wrong. And the child says, but you said this is beard. I mean, the same letter. The teacher says, we read a book, and in the book, the word was bread. You would have to applaud the child for finding beard.
Because you didn't think of it.
You didn't think of it. It's the same letter. It's the same letters put together. So you applaud the child and say, okay, now can we also rearrange it? So you found that the letters will make 2 words. And so I find it over and over again where maybe you help a child, you do this and this. The teachers seem to have answers that they want. And if you don't give that to them, they fail you. But you find that life is not like that.
Life is not like that.
And so sometimes they will say, why bother? Why even learn? And it doesn't encourage problem solving. It doesn't encourage creativity. And so we can get all the degrees and we can't problem solve because we're not training our brains to do that. I'm helping a little girl who goes to Lincoln. I think I can say that. He's smart, very, very smart. Go to school, do everything, and so he's put there. Except that, at Lincoln, they'll give you nothing to memorize. Everything is problem solving. And she's having trouble, not because she's not smart, but because she's not being used to working that way, to doing that way. And it's frustrating. I say, but our kids are intelligent.
Yes, memory is important, but so is understanding, and so is creative thinking, intellect.
But you see, memory doesn't create anything.
It's just a memory.
It's just a memory.